That was weird, zany, and slightly depressing at the end. Also, butts. Lots of butts. DC Universe's Doom Patrol, Episode 12, Cyborg Patrol, review and breakdown. Hey Twisted people, it's your Twisted Girl next door here, and today I am doing a review, breakdown, and of course my comic book talk of DC Universe's Doom Patrol, Episode 12, Cyborg Patrol. Now, if you're new here, this is the way it goes. I give my overall thoughts of the episode, as in my overall thoughts of the episode, the happenings in the episode, and what I thought about that. Also, my ship talk, because I do love talking about relationships. Predictions, even though I totally get them wrong when it comes down to this particular show. And finally, because this is a show based off of comic book characters, I do comic book talk. Overall, I'm still processing this episode in a way. I had to think on it a little bit longer because when it ended, I think the first thing that came to my mind was I didn't like that. Man, I did not like that episode. But then I thought to myself, maybe it was my bias in the fact that of the ending. The ending was really super depressing, and I kind of have a bone to pick with the show when it comes down to the way that certain characters are getting closure and progress, while other characters seem to be getting like destroyed episode by episode, which is kind of weird. But yeah, overall, I it didn't sit very well with me, and I want to get into after I talk about the happenings why that is. So that was fine. I think there were some moments that really worked that were funny, but overall, I felt like the pacing was a little off and I wasn't too happy with the storyline direction at the end. So, yeah, I've got some mixed feelings. I think overall it was good. I enjoyed the whole butts thing, but there were some specific things that just didn't sit well with me. So, yeah. Operation Save Cyborg. So the episode opens up with the ant farm, which is being ran by the Bureau of Normalcy, and it seems like to be the deeper like segment of the Bureau of Normalcy, and Cyborg is there, and they've already started doing tests and things on him. He's not at his strongest because he has grid outside of himself, and so he finds it so there's no way he can kind of physically break out of there. Darren Jones, our mini villain of this season so far, talks to his superiors at the Bureau of Normalcy, aka the Ant Farm, and he basically explains that although they do have a relationship with Star Labs in terms of like, getting weapons and things of that nature, which just shows you the corruption and bureaucracy even in the DC universe of like politics and superheroes, oh my gosh, that having Cyborg is a greater endeavor than the, up and up relationship they have with Star Labs. So he basically convinces them that although this is kind of like crossing a boundary to get Cyborg of all people because he's like a famous superhero, that the rewards will be greater if they're able to test his abilities and things of that nature, which is a little weird because if they already have a relationship with Star Labs, couldn't they just ask for his blueprint or something? But whatever. So they decide that it's okay that Darren Jones keeps Cyborg hostage. Cyborg is put in a cell and somehow Grid is back inside of him, or he's hearing Grid's voice, which doesn't make any sense because didn't he take Grid out of him? And somehow Grid is also updating and infusing him with more mechanical parts. So he went from like, I think it was 60% to almost like 70% in this like short scene that we have. We also see that he has a neighbor 722, which is basically just the room number. And I'm pretty sure that is Flex Mentallo that he's talking to, even though the guy doesn't remember who he is. So there's that. Meanwhile, the rest of the team of Doom Patrol, not yet quite Doom Patrol, is trying to figure out what to do about Vic being taken by the Bureau of Normalcy. Larry pretty much, tells the rest of the group how he knows the Bureau of Normalcy, what he went through in terms of the torture, in terms of being used as a weapon by them for years. So he confesses that, he gets that off his chest. The rest of the team is trying to figure out how the heck are they going to be able to save Vic from this situation. And then Silas, Vic's father, shows up and comes up with a plan. Meanwhile, Vic is going crazier and crazier as Grid continues to show him footage of like the accident before he got turned into Cyborg, all types of stuff with his father. There's just a lot of stuff going on right inside of his brain, and it was very uncomfortable to watch because it seemed like pretty much mental torture he was going through, and then in this like whole entire episode. So then hijinks occur as the Doom Patrol gets taken into the ant farm. And we saw this twist coming that Silas made it seem like he was trading the rest of the team for Vic, when in reality he was not. It was a setup. And more so, even before this, Darren Jones realizes that something's wrong with Vic, so he already wanted to give him back anyway, and he even tells Silas, like, I know you realize something's wrong with him, but there's no takebacks in terms of us getting Doom Patrol. But little does he know that it was a switcheroo. Yes, and so Rita was up in Cliff's mouth the whole time, and she oozes out of there and sets everyone free. More so, Jane sets herself free because we get another view of Karen with bargain basement Dexter, and all heck breaks loose. On their way out, Cliff convinces them to release the other prisoners, so they set the other prisoners free, which that seems pretty cool. I couldn't recognize anyone that was coming out of the prisons. Let me know if you saw anyone that you think might be from the comics or someone that may be later coming around, but I'm pretty sure, I guess, Flex Mentallo also got out of there as well. And also the evil eating, I don't even want to call them evil, maybe they weren't evil because they seem to only be attacking the bad guys, but the people eating butts came out as well, and puns galore. And then it looked like Darren Jones got eaten. I'm not sure, he kind of died off screen, so maybe he's not really dead. And yeah, so that was a twist. Vic is finally pushed to the very edge and pretty much over the cliff when he sees the footage, or what he thinks is the footage of his father basically putting the nanobites in him. And what he's explained is that the nanobites are something that could, if they go wrong, just start rebuilding him as machine, even though we find out later that's not really the case, that it's only supposed to help him if his own machinery, the machinery that already exists, is if that thing gets messed up, tech, science, oh my gosh. And so this footage puts him over the edge and he attacks Silas. He pretty much beats him. I don't want to say to death because I am really crossing my fingers. I'll talk about this in a second, but it looks like he beats him unconscious and he can't wake him back up. And then Mr. Nobody reveals himself. And just like most villains do, he tells Vic his plot, that he told Vic to, stop searching for Chief, but he says, you headline superheroes are all the same. So he pretty much planted these memories and this footage and this doubt inside of Vic to eventually get him to the point to snap and to eventually attack his father, to eventually break Vic. And so what we get is Vic trying to wake his dad up and cradling his body as the rest of the team, turns the corner, and the episode ends just like that. Okay, so Rita, Cliff, and Jane, they were very funny in this episode. I really loved Rita. She's starting to have this very subtle power to her, and this, this great strength inside of her. Like when she's breaking Cliff out and she makes him fall from the ceiling to, drop on the woman who had basically been calling Cliff like garbage heap most of the episode. So that was therapeutic, and it was great that Rita was really just defending their right to be weird as they are. So she seems to be really accepting more and more of who she is, and I really like those little parts that we're getting throughout the episode of her. Cliff was also funny. It kind of sucks that everyone keeps on making fun of his hardware, but I feel like Niles made him that way for a reason. I mean, Niles has all this technology, it's like there has to be like a purpose as to why he made him not like Cyborg in a way. So who knows, but that was funny. Jane turning into Karen, and that whole bargain basement Dexter thing was hilarious. The actor who's playing Dirk was very funny. I really like that whole dynamic, him dancing to Reservoir Dogs type theme song. Yeah, it all worked really well. That was very funny. I feel like I should add a segment called the gross out moment of the episode when it comes to this series. I'm really thinking about adding that because every episode has had a gross out moment. This one in particular was Rita's ooze of herself coming out of Cliff's mouth. So that's the second gross thing coming out of Cliff's mouth in this season, and it's only season 1. So I enjoyed the Justice League references. I liked I laughed out loud when Cliff was like, can he just text Batman? And I did kind of find it funny that Silas called around and no one else was able to help him, to the point where, but you know, that always happens, right? Unless they really wanted to be a crossover when it comes to any, whether it's Marvel, whether it's DC, whether it's any of these comic books, unless it's a designated crossover, somehow it's always conveniently left so that the other superheroes are nowhere to be found, like whatever. So I thought that was funny that we got a Batman reference. Pretty sure that was Flex, because as if you remember what I was saying in my last video about his character from the comic books, he very much loses his memory like he does. I mean, even though the gang originally meets him on Danny the Street, in this case, I feel like Vic met him at the ant farm, and I'll talk a little bit more about the ant farm in my comic book comparison, which is connected to Flex's plot line, but I'm pretty sure that was Flex. I wasn't expecting the butts, but I was pleasantly surprised. I don't know, can we call that a gross out moment too? Because there was a shot of one of the butts like walking away with an arm in its like butt mouth. That was kind of gross looking. I like the Darren Jones villain. I'm pretty sure he got Ian off of the grid. Or maybe he didn't. He seems to have 9 lives, because I thought he got taken out on Danny the Street, but then he showed up again. So maybe he's going to be one of those minor or like secondary villains that always kind of comes back throughout, because they do need someone connected to the Bureau of Normalcy, which is kind of a consistent, outfit of the Doom Patrol universe. So I like his character. I'm not even going to say kind of. I like his villain character. He's just out and out funny in some ways, but very sinister. And I really like the way the actor plays him. So hopefully this isn't the last time we see him. All right, so now let's talk about the Cyborg situation, okay? That was super sad, and I'm gonna say I feel like it was slightly unnecessary. Now, what we saw, also what I wanted to note is that it seems when Larry and the negative energy is separated, that really affects Larry. So we may be getting a hint that Larry can't survive without negative energy. I think that was sort of implied earlier on in the season because he kept passing out and things, but he was able to stay awake without negative energy this time, although he seemed to be getting weak. So I thought it was telling that he ended up taking negative energy, even though he could have been like, well, you're out of me and I'm awake, so we're good now. But he wanted him to come back. So that was telling of their relationship. Great progress. But I also think he was weakened. So maybe he needs him either way or he can die. So yeah, but I say that to say Larry seems to get progress, right? In a positive way. Cliff has gotten his own kind of progress, not the best progress, but it's to the point where it's not so like detrimental at the end of every time that we explore the interpersonal. And for whatever reason, they decided, I mean, maybe because Cyborg is Cyborg, they went big, like go big or go home when it came to his angst. Like, did he really have to beat? I mean, I saw it coming, it just seemed like it was only a matter of time before he snapped. I just wasn't necessary though. I'm on the fence. Like, I really hope Silas is actually in a coma. I hope he's not dead. I really hope he's not dead because, Vic has to deal with the guilt of thinking he killed his mother, right? Or that he caused an accident that killed his mother. That's enough, right? Why add up to that this idea that he brutally attacked his dad and killed him? Now, I get it. This helped us see that Mr. Nobody is really a villain because, we hear Mr. Nobody is a villain, but the actor and the way they portray him, he's so funny and quirky to the point where at times you're like, oh, I want Mr. Nobody to show up. I know that's me. I say that. So I think this particular point let us or reminded us that this guy is a villain and he is not in any way to be messed with. Like, he is sinister in a very dark way, right? But I just think it was kind of like, why so targeted at Vic? I get it though, because Vic was kind of the cheerleader, right? Like, Doom Patrol up to that point, the rest of the team felt pretty helpless, and his leadership has helped galvanize them in some way. I will say that, but I don't know. I mean, I'm worried because I'm like, how is he supposed to come back from this? Like, he already had the guilt of killing his mom, sort of. So how's he going to come back from potentially killing his dad? And I don't know about you, but I don't want a whole second season of Cyborg angst where he's like Larry has been this whole season, where like every episode is him trying to climb out of, the abyss of darkness. And I guess what I'm saying is I just feel a little kind of sort of some kind of way that when we finally get this interpersonal episode, or this episode really focusing in on Vic's character, which, we've been getting Cliff's character and Larry's character and Jane's, of course, that the three of them kind of had to, go through their stuff, but they had like positive progress. And so we finally focus on Vic, and I think, oh, we're finally going to work this out for Vic. And oh my gosh, no, it totally went in the opposite direction of that. Like, why? So this scares me for Rita, because maybe the writers and the showrunners have it in their mind that it's like, okay, we're going to give you three positive sort of things happening with these three characters, and then the other two have to be horrible to keep the drama going. So I'm a little worried for Rita's interpersonal episode whenever that happens, because we haven't been getting that yet. Wondering why, Cyborg kind of got the short end of the stick on this one. Jane, Rita, Cyborg. This is me naming them because there really was no ship talk. I guess you could kind of count negative energy and Larry, but I don't consider that romantic necessarily. I usually, when I do ships, I'm talking about romantic ships. So I think that's just like a really strong familial kind of bond that they've got going on. I don't think it's romantic. But yeah, Jane was very protective of Vic this episode, and Rita was very protective of Vic this episode. Now, I already ship Rita and Vic, so that was, a hint, I think, of their bond. But it kind of surprised me that Jane actually cared about not revealing anything to the rest of the team, or even to Silas when it came to Vic. Like, he confided in her and she listened, which is kind of weird, right? Because she usually doesn't give a crap about anybody's, like, she's always about airing everybody's laundry, right? And for some reason, this time around, she decided not to until, Larry did. So yeah, I actually have a prediction this time. And my prediction is, if Silas is straight up dead, that is going to make Vic go super, super dark. And we don't need that. So I'm hoping Silas is in a coma, and so there's some hope to bring him back. Either way, now that Vic knows that it was Mr. Nobody's doing, maybe he can trust his software again and put grid back in him. But then again, if Mr. Nobody was able to do that, how does he make it so he can't keep doing that? So for comic book talk, I kind of wanted to talk about the Ant Farm, because the Ant Farm actually does very much appear in the Doom Patrol universe, along with, the Bureau of Normalcy, although it's called the Men from Nowhere, which I think are pretty much the same. Correct me if I'm wrong, but every time I, see the Ant Farm, and when I look it up, it seems to be connected to the Men of Nowhere, but they seem to be pushing the Bureau of Normalcy wording in this particular case. Although in the comics, it seems like the Men from Nowhere do the same thing the Bureau of Normalcy does. But anyway, the Ant Farm is very much in the comic books. And in this particular case, it's like deep, deep down in the tunnels under the Pentagon, far away. And it's like this ever-growing machine that is supposed to have the blueprint for the so-called New World Order. And also, when it comes to the Ant Farm, this is actually greatly tied to Flex Mentallo's plot line, which is once again why I think that was very much Flex that was Cyborg's roommate, or like neighbor. So more so, it's connected to him. He pretty much discovers it in his plot line in a way. So we didn't get much of his perspective, Flex I'm talking about, in this particular one. They kind of did it through Cyborg, but it is very much connected to Flex. So I think we're getting closer and closer to finally meeting Flex, and maybe him remembering. Because if you also notice in this episode, he couldn't remember who he was and where he came from and how long he'd been there, which is very similar to, if you remember, my last video where I talked about Flex's character and how on Danny the Street they met him when he had memory loss. So maybe they just kind of did it for him being at the Ant Farm instead. And then my second comic book point is actually a question to you all. I looked far and wide to see if those sinister butts were in the comics. If you know if they are in the comics, please direct me to what issue and what year, because I just feel like they were so random, but they couldn't have just been made up. Like, who comes up with that just randomly for this show? Like, let's just have some killing butts. No, they had to be in the comics. I just couldn't find it. So, yeah, I'm gonna maintain they're in the comics. If not, that's fine. I mean, Ezekiel the Roach also isn't in the comics, so maybe they just kind of decided to go with this, the most random thing. But I have a feeling they're probably in the comics. So let me know in the comment section if you know if they're in the comics or not, and what issue and what year they appeared. Okay, so what did you think of DC Universe's Doom Patrol Episode 12 Cyborg Patrol? Did you like it? Do you think that they went a little too far when it came to Vic's plotline? Do you think Vic's going to be able to come back from this? Are you with me in thinking that, why didn't he get a little bit of progress like Larry and Cliff and even Jane have sort of gotten this season? Let me know. Comment down below. Let me know your thoughts, how you felt about this episode, the whole heist thing. Did you dig it? What did you think of the butts? Let me know if they're in the comics. Help me out, people. And also, be sure to subscribe so that you're the first to know when I post my videos of all things horror, dark fantasy, and dark superhero. Thanks for watching. Let's get creepy together.